Hi everyone. My last video was mostly just a lot of talking, so instead of doing a lot of talking in this one, we're just gonna start tearing the heads off this thing because just pulling it in here seemed like it wanted to make it catch on fire, so here we go. All right, I'm gonna come back out tomorrow and get this thing on the lift, get these exhaust manifolds off, and then we should be taking the push rods out and taking the heads off. One thing I noticed before moving on to tomorrow was that there were spider webs underneath the intake and a couple of little metal pieces. They almost looked like staples. I stuck them right here just to show you guys what I'm talking about. Those were under the intake, just sitting on the engine. Speaking of push rods, this one and the one right across from it, this one, are both super loose for some reason. So I hope that doesn't have anything to do with that, but I'm gonna be seeing Dad tomorrow. So hopefully I can ask him while I'm getting the heads off why that might be the case. I can't ever leave well enough alone, so I didn't end up going to bed. I decided to keep going, which is okay, because I got the manifolds off and I got all the push rods out. After looking closely for a minute, probably people who know their stuff already knew what these were, but it looks like they are part of the lifters. I don't know how well you can see it, but there's like little springs in there holding those pieces down. Well, on this one, third from the front, and this one, second from the front on the driver's side, those spring locking pieces, which I'm assuming is what those are missing, and the top of the lifter is popping out. So that's cool. I wonder if I can buy individual lifters or if I can put those springs back in, or if I have to buy a whole new cam set because those things broke. Should be interesting. It's officially the next day. Here's a close-up of my lifter issue. There's a good one versus a not good one with the top missing. And there's 16 new lifters. I bought new lifters. I ended up buying a $100 set instead of the set that I had originally bought, because that set all by itself is $200, and a whole nother cam and everything was only gonna be like $3, and I wasn't gonna buy a cam, and I'm not convinced this isn't gonna happen again necessarily. So cheap lifters it is. Little side note, when I took the heads out, I cut the bottom off of a windshield washer fluid jug, and I just stuck it over the top of the exhaust because I did not take the Y pipe out to do this. I just left it there because I'm lazy. Anyway, first things first, I'm working on cleaning up these surfaces so that I can then move over to cleaning up the surfaces on the heads and get the heads back on with a good head gasket. We were looking at all of the pistons, and this guy right here is where we think the failure occurred. I don't really see where in the gasket mark it would have been. Everything, like all the lines look pretty solid to me, but it is by far the cleanest one out of all of them, and it seems to be right on that one side. So if the head gasket was leaking, that's where we believe it was leaking. It's been a couple hours, but basically what I've done is I have finished cleaning up the gasket surfaces for the block. You'll also notice that these are all new lifters now. While I was cleaning these all up, I was basically just soaking those in a bucket of oil. Before I stuck them in, I also took one of the push rods and just kind of pumped them each a couple times to make sure there was oil in them, that they were nice and full, and I stuck them all in. They all seem to fit pretty good. They're not the same, but they'll do the job for now. I'm coming over here. I've got one head I've done the gasket surfaces on as well, and the head gasket surface underneath. I've also cleaned up the bolts, so gotta do this one next. That should take me, I don't know, probably another hour or so, and then I can move on to cleaning up the valve covers and the intake and stuff like that. Getting back to the car in its present form. It's all put back together. Everything is nice and tight and sealed up. I've run it a few times now, and it is not leaking anywhere anymore, which is fantastic. It's not getting all nasty and gross. We got the coolant all filled up, got it all bled, and everything seems to be working at least as good as it was before. We got the timing all double checked and everything, so that's all back to normal. I have this Edelbrock Performer cam. I don't remember exactly which one it is, but it ends up being about 14 degrees on that paint mark there. So everything seems to be going about as good as it was before, and don't worry, I am going to be taking the tape off the coil wires eventually. For right now, it's just in case I have to take something apart. I will not have to hunt them all down again like I just did, because I didn't have the foresight to do that before I put them in. So anyway, everything is running at least as good as it was before, with a couple exceptions. So the not radiator, but the temperature sensor that was plumbed up to the gooseneck ended up just snapping off. And I don't know why. And the sensor was failing as well. The fan was not coming on. You'll see I have these alligator clips holding the leads together, because the fan itself is still working, but it wasn't coming on. The temperature sensor had failed. And then I just reached over to grab it to kind of finesse the plugs there, and it just snapped off right in my hand. I have it over here. It's literally just that really small brass threaded piece just broke right off. And I think before that even happened, it was just not working. So gonna need a new sensor. Having essentially hardwired the fan to be running all the time using that, I think we also need to try a new fan. When it's going down the road, and I mean, it's cold here right now. It's very cold here. I live in Maine, and it's 13 degrees Fahrenheit out right now. So it's really cold. And just sitting outside with the current fan, as long as you weren't revving it up or anything like that, it was sitting right about 210. Not ideal, at the top of the range that you'd potentially want it to be, but less than ideal, to say the least. So the moment you step on the gas, it starts to go up again. And then once it goes up over 210, it just spirals from there. It starts to just slowly overheat. So at the very least, it's not just blowing out of the radiator of the overflow reservoir anymore, but it is still overheating, just not as catastrophically. So I think we're heading in the right direction. Everything went back together just fine. But the next thing on my list, because when you drive it, the temperature maintains itself okay. But when it's just idling, it keeps overheating. So, and that's going off of even with the blown head gasket, or the supposed blown head gasket, in the summertime when it was closer to 70 and 80 degrees outside all the time. So going off of that, I'm assuming the radiator is okay. This is rated for like 300 horsepower application. It's the thickest, juiciest radiator that I could find. So I think the radiator is good. I think the fan is where it's failing. And I think I know why now. So I've been doing a little bit of research on fans in particular. I didn't do very much when I bought this because I was just looking for a size. And where I'm basically ended up now is I have found out, at least going off of just some information I found online and like watching a Holley fan information video, that for an 8-cylinder application such as this one, you probably would be ideally using a fan that produces at least 2,500 CFM. So this fan was advertised for 3,000 CFM. But the more I look online at name brand products, and the more I investigate into what these fans actually produce, it's probably really only producing somewhere around 12 to 1,500 CFM. And when you stick your hand behind it when it's blowing, it doesn't feel very powerful at all. And I don't know that it ever did. So I'm thinking the fan here is where I'm really getting hooked up. And of course, I need to get a new temperature sensor switch for the gooseneck as well. I'll take this opportunity now, since we've kind of gone over where we're at with the cooling system, to tell you guys about how I hooked up this throttle cable. So this is just the stock Z31 throttle cable. I think I'm gonna end up picking up a new one, see if I can get it to focus a little bit better here. Because the clip that keeps this on the firewall is broken. So every time you like step on the gas, it kind of pops out and kind of messes with things. So I'll probably end up getting a new one just to make sure that doesn't become a problem in the future. But what I've done right now, at least for now, until I can figure out something a little bit cleaner for this, is I've just put a loop in it, sorry. I've put a loop in it, and it just comes around here. Now, this is just like an Edelbrock throttle / kickdown cable bracket right here. It comes with this L bracket and this L bracket. Let's see if I can get in here a little bit better. There we go. So this is an L bracket right here, and there's one there. And you'll notice that it's like a square cut in a piece of solid metal. So for the kickdown cable there, and it was the same for the throttle cable that is being used right there right now. You'll notice that I cut it out. That is because I had to, in order to get the throttle cable to actually fit into that space. I couldn't get it through the square itself. And of course there are implications, like I couldn't have fit washers around it or anything like that. So for right now, there are 2 washers. You can see there a little bit. Still just using my phone for a camera, but you can see them there. There's 2 washers basically pinching it on the bottom and from here, the left side. There we go. So it's kind of just pinching a corner of this bracket right now. It's pretty darn tight, and it seems to be working pretty good. It hasn't come off in all of the running that it has done, and all of the pulling and stuff like that. So I think it's good. And that seems to be working pretty good. As far as holding the throttle cable, and of course the kickdown cable is not an issue because that's meant for this. Over here, kickdown cable is it just works. The throttle cable, though, I ended up having to do a little bit of redneckery, kind of like over there, in order to make this work, at least for now. This, I don't know if I'll actually have to change. This is actually working very well and is totally secure in every spot where it's pinched and everything like that. It's not like this where there's potential for it to like squeeze out and fall off. This is actually very tight and very well put together. It's just not as pretty as, you know, a application that was meant for this might be. But this actually works very well. There were 3 of those L brackets, I believe, is the story with this. Those 2 there, and then a third. And what I did was I chopped the end off right there, if this will focus. There we go. I chopped the end right off of it, and then just kind of ground those down to a curve so that they wouldn't be sharp or anything like that, because obviously if you're reaching around here, you don't want to get cut. And I rounded off this corner for pretty much the same reason. And then I ended up grinding this corner down a lot. So it ends up making like this kind of like 90-degree curve shape out of itself. You can see here before I ground it down, I don't know if this camera will actually focus on it, but that throttle cable was starting to rub on that. And it's not rubbing anymore. That's just left over from when it was. But worth noting, I ended up having to grind that down. This was also bent that way, and I'm not sure if this was the right choice, but I bent it back to 90 degrees. I know stock they come like this, just by looking online
at what Edelbrock is advertising for the 600 CFM non-EGR carb, but I bent this because it was also rubbing on the other side every time it pulled. This was bent out a little bit towards the throttle cable, and it would rub on the back of this as well. So in order to make sure, at least until I can get the new throttle cable, that this one doesn't just get worn through, I ended up grinding the corner of that off, and I bent this back to just a straight 90 degrees. Coming over to the other side, just to see if I can give you a better look at the throttle cable itself. I don't know if I can from this side, honestly. Get it to focus on there. You can kind of see the other side of the stud on the throttle cable poking through there, where it would on a regular like Chevy throttle cable. There was one other thing that I wanted to go over that I hadn't gone over previously, and that is this right here. Let's see if I can get a focus on it. It's that brass nipple that we'd put on there. And I mentioned it a couple videos ago that we had it plugged, but we ended up putting just a little brass nipple on there because the Turbo 350 throttle actually needs vacuum. So we just used a little piece of hose. It's very similar to what we did with the fuel line. In fact, I think we ended up using the leftover of this line here to go down, and that's it right there. And it goes under the car to the vacuum on the transmission. I also got a new battery, which is probably the best $90 I've spent on this whole car since I have bought it. Get a new battery, you will not regret it.
Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Once I get the new fan, I will definitely be making another one. I'll see you guys later. Thank you. Like and subscribe to make sure you get updates, and follow me on social media to get some sneak peeks of early stuff before it gets turned into a video, because I think by now we've all learned that it can take me a while to get one out sometimes. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye.